Hello everybody, welcome to my channel Prediction News. My name is Dominic and welcome to my first video. This video is just a basic video. It's a how I think the 2026 Senate election will look like, just if you go by the polls or the current rate or the current ratings by websites like Race to the White House and all that. So right here we have a map, a clear map, a blank map of how everything looks right now. Here right now we have 34 seats for the Democrats, 31 seats for the Republicans, and I'll start out by rating what I think are safe seats for each state. So what I consider safe for the Democrats right now is Oregon, Colorado, Illinois. I'll give them Massachusetts, Rhode Island, New Jersey, Delaware. I don't think these are states that Republicans could win. Delaware, for the Senate seat, I'm not sure if I would give them New Jersey anytime soon. They could definitely win locally, but something as big as a Senate seat, I don't believe so. For Republicans, they definitely have a lot more. I give them Idaho, Wyoming, South Dakota, Kansas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, all these states. They have a bunch of states that I consider to be definitely safe states for them. Now let's go to what I consider safe, likely leaning states. I'll get that to New Mexico. Who else? Virginia. I feel like Virginia on the Senate level might be more safe than lean or likely. I'll give them Minnesota, because Minnesota I feel like is a purple state, but Democrats always seem to run the correct candidates, while Republicans always seem to run the wrong candidates. Let's see. For what I consider likely or lean states for Republicans, I'll say Montana, Florida, and I'd say that's pretty much it. For Democrats, I'll give them likely to New Hampshire. We'll see who runs there and how races start to ramp up. But now, right here, we have 9 toss-ups. It's like a bunch of wild cards here, like Nebraska, Alaska, North Carolina, and all those. In fact, those are states that are really close. People don't really know what's going on here. So yeah, let's start looking at what posters and ratings are giving them. So right here we just have just a basic Wikipedia and all that. So let's start off with the biggest state, Alaska. Before, I believe yesterday, Alaska was pretty much more guaranteed Republican state. But ever since Mary Peltola announced her candidacy for the Democratic primary, it has turned more on the prediction side. It has turned more tilt or lean. On the polling side, it's always more consistently been for Mary Peltola. So right here we have RC. We have like 2 sources going against each other. We have polls on average saying that Mary Peltola is going to win. Then we have predictions and ratings saying that Dan Sullivan is more likely to win, or at least the state is more likely to be Republican. This is where I'll put in my opinion, and I believe Mary Peltola in a blue wave year is more likely to win because she has already proven that she can win and also lose. In Alaska already, she was already the representative for the House and all that. Let's see if we can find her electoral history. Let's see. Right here, House election. She was 4th on an overall blanket primary, and then once it went to the actual election, she ended up beating a very popular Sarah Palin by roughly like 3-ish points, around there. And she did end up losing the seat later on in 2024, which was more of a Republican wave year. But now that's flipping back to a Democrat wave year, I'll say this seat is more likely to go to the Democrats with Mary Peltola as their option. So right here, I'll give them, I'll say a tilt blue. I think it'll be very close, but I think Mary Peltola can just barely edge it out against the Republicans. And okay, and now let's go to our next state, which will be, I'll say, Nebraska. Right here, Nebraska doesn't really have a Democrat running. Democrats have kind of seen that they're not going to win this state under the Democrat name. That I think, I wouldn't say they're taking Bernie Sanders' advice, but as a whole, the Democrat Party in Nebraska has seen that there's a better chance that an independent can win compared to a Democrat every day of the week. So right here we have very popular Dan Osborne, who has ran already for Senate in 2024, almost beating out Deb Fischer, came within like 8-ish points of Deb Fischer. Very close in a Senate race that shouldn't have been close for Republicans, as they have a major foothold in Nebraska. I mean, look at the 2018, 57 to 38. That's crazy. And then it fell all the way down to 53 to 46. If this wasn't a red wave, I'd say Dan Osborne could have really, really had it down to a 50-50. I mean, look at the polls are as well. Here, Dan Osborne was winning a bunch of them as well, even tied right before the election. So yeah, also had a bunch of endorsements from other parties, like Reform Party. I mean, these are smaller parties, but had a bunch of endorsements, or had overall like endorsements, or just was given a pass by other parties like the Libertarian, Legal Marijuana, and obviously the Democrats. So let's go to how the polls and the ratings are saying Dan Osborne, or how the Nebraska race would go. So right here we have Pete Ricketts. Pete Ricketts isn't really that popular. He's more your typical, like, I don't know, he's just your typical billionaire that more, I feel like, serves Trump more than the state, which I feel like in a more polarizing year, and where people are starting to have more negative opinions about billionaires, is not really the position you want to be in. I feel like also an endorsement by AIPAC, where people are starting to have second thoughts about just Israel's relationship with the United States, might not be that beneficial anymore. And then right here we have Dan Osborne. Oh, let's look how the money they raised. $2.4 million by Pete Ricketts, and then $2 million by Dan Osborne, who doesn't have any party support, is just on his own. He's just very good at fundraising. So yeah, that's also could be worrying for the Republicans. So let's look at the ratings. Let's look at the endorsements for Dan Osborne. Robert Reich? I don't know. Former Secretary of Labor. Dan Klebe of the Nebraska Party, or Nebraska Democratic Party. Adam Kinzinger, and all that. So already has a bunch of, like, I'd say, bipartisan support from Republicans and Democrats. So yeah, there's only 2 polls out. You think there'd be more polls, considering if like this, people really aren't looking at this race. I think this race could be a major upset. But let's see, 2 very close polls, 46 to 45, 46 to 47. Both of them are done by more Democrat-leaning pollsters. Let's see this. This one was commissioned by Osborne's campaign, so they could have swung the numbers just to make Osborne look better. The pollster, or the election ratings, are more for Pete Ricketts, but they also haven't been updated in quite a while. August, October, September. In my opinion, I think I need to see more from Dan Osborne and more campaigning. I feel like, well, obviously I don't live in Nebraska, so I don't know what the campaigning inside is going from, but I feel like I'm not really seeing that much from him. I'm not seeing really anyone talk about him. Pete Ricketts, obviously, he was former governor. He's already known in Nebraska and all that. Republican Governor Association. Like, everybody in Nebraska knows him, I would say. Well, not everybody, obviously, but most people in Nebraska knows him. I'm not sure if Dan Osborne has that same recognition. I feel like getting closer to November, Dan Osborne could tighten up this race, but for now, I'll give this race a very lean Republican for Pete Ricketts. I think it's more safe for Republicans than Alaska is for Democrats. So now let's go on to our next state, which will be Texas. Texas has been really interesting. There is a 3-way race for the Republican primary. Well, obviously more than 3-way, but 3 major candidates are running: John Cornyn, Wesley Hunt, and Ken Paxton. John Cornyn is the incumbent senator, has been the incumbent since 2002. Wesley Hunt is a representative for Texas, and then Ken Paxton has been the Texas Attorney General for 2015. John Cornyn has never had a competitive has really never had a competitive primary. He's been pretty consistent in Texas. He knows how to win. 2020, a blue wave year, he won by slightly under 10%, but basically 10%. And look at this, 60%, 54%. He consistently knows how to win. He has been popular enough in Texas and Republican Texas to win. Ken Paxton, on the other hand, I wouldn't say he's that popular. He is more right wing. He's more aligned with Donald Trump. Would help Donald Trump, or like wouldn't say that Donald Trump lost the election and all that. And he's already been indicted, or I'm pretty sure impeached. Yeah, I'm pretty sure impeached for, what was it? Forgot what it was. Sorry about this. Yeah, no. Yeah, indicted on 3 criminal charges, 2 counts of fraud, and then 1 failing to register for the state securities regulator. 3rd-degree felony. So he is a felon, or he has. Yeah, I believe this would make him a felon, maybe. And he was indicted by a Republican-controlled like Congress or like House in Texas. So already a bad look for him, but he's been keeping it close. Wesley Hunt, I think it's more between John Cornyn and Ken Paxton. Wesley Hunt could maybe win if it was just another year without a Ken Paxton, without a John Cornyn, maybe another Republican. But let's look at the polls here really quickly. So John Cornyn has fallen behind in recent polls, even behind Wesley Hunt at some point. But right now it's more close between John Cornyn and Ken Paxton. I just don't think Wesley Hunt has the edge. He has never won a poll here before. So whoever wins, John Cornyn or Ken Paxton, will say a lot about how this race goes. But the Democrats also have an interesting primary right here. At first, it was Colin Allred versus James Talarico, and now it's Jasmine Crockett versus James Talarico after Allred withdrew. I think if Democrats want to win this race, I think James Talarico is the man. I think he is more bipartisan, or at least he's able to gather more bipartisan vote. I think Republicans don't really like Jasmine Crockett. There's a bunch of just hate ads, there's a bunch of hate posts on her. So she doesn't really have a good face or doesn't have a good reputation with Republicans already. She is, from what I've seen, a bit popular with the Democrats. But I feel like the more James Talarico gets known and his name gets spread around Texas, I feel like he could possibly beat Jasmine Crockett. But right now, in the most recent poll, they have him losing. So let's just say Jasmine Crockett is the candidate for the Democrats here. Let's see how the polling and the predictions or the ratings look for the Democrats as a whole. So 2 and then 3 likelies for the Republicans here, with Race to the White House recently updating their January 12th. Yeah. And then let's look at the polls for Jasmine Crockett. Loses 2 polls to John Cornyn, almost by 10% here. Loses 2 polls to Ken Paxton, a bit closer. So that could be good news for the Democrats if Republicans do nominate Ken Paxton. And then loses 1 poll against Wesley Hunt. James Talarico has been more convincing against these candidates in the polls, has beat 1 against Wesley Hunt, has tied against Ken Paxton, has kept it somewhat close against John Cornyn. But since he loses to Jasmine Crockett, I'll say these are the polls we'll go off by now, which I feel like would put Texas maybe in the likely for Republicans. So let's go back here. Go for Republicans. I'll give them, I think as November comes, I think if an election was held today, it would be likely. I'll say as November comes closer, it will go more towards the lean column. So now let's go to Iowa. Iowa is an interesting state. Iowa's demographic, or at least population demographic, hasn't really changed, but they have overall leaned more towards the Republicans ever since the Obama era. So the incumbent senator for Iowa is Johnny Ernst, but she isn't really that popular. One of the more unpopular senators in the country, and I guess she can see the writing on the wall and has chosen to back down from all this, and I guess let another Republican, possibly more popular, take over. But also Iowa has an interesting election cycle because they also have a governor election, which I feel like could go toward the Democrat is Rob Sand. He is a pretty moderate Democrat. He's the only Democrat that's been able to consistently win in Iowa, even though they've been having all these red wave years. So I feel like with a strong Democrat nominee for governor, that could sway a couple votes over to the Democrats on the Senate level. But let's look at the Republican primaries. We have Jim Carlin and Ashley Hinson. Ashley Hinson is a pretty convincing candidate. She's part of the 2nd District, which is only a +4 for Republicans. But she's an overperformer in my opinion. Let's see right here, electoral history. In 2020, or I guess 2022, it was 54 to 4. It was 54 to 45, and then 2024 57 to 41. So even in a district which doesn't lean that far in for the Republicans, she still overperforms massively and creates a big lead for her and the Republicans. So I feel like she is part of the candidate for the Republicans. Jim Carlin, he's a state senator, so obviously doesn't have as big of a name or reach for Iowa. Let's see if there's any polls so far. Ashley Hinson has also gotten the Trump endorsement and all these senator endorsements, so I feel like that also already says a lot. Are there any polls for them? Hypothetical polls? Not really. But I'll say Ashley Hinson is more likely, has raised way more money than Carlin. The Democrat primary is pretty split between, I feel like, 3 main people. Let's see the polls. Well, yeah, I'm pretty sure it's more split between Josh Turek, Zach Walz, and then where's Nathan on here? He's endorsed here, but isn't showing up here. Okay, whatever then. Let's look at the polls to see who's more likely to win. No clear signs, I feel like, on who. Well, there's no polls for the Democrats on here either, or for individual, like for the Democrat primaries. I'm not sure who would win. Josh Turek is, I'm pretty sure, who's the more progressive? I know some of them. Well, Josh Turek has got an endorsement by Ro Khanna, but I know one of these has got an endorsement by Bernie Sanders. I guess it doesn't say here, but I swear I saw that somewhere. But anywho, let's continue on with this. Let's go to the hypothetical polling, which all has Johnny Ernst, doesn't have any of the current candidates for the Republican primary. But let's see, predictions all say that Republicans are going to win, and all these polls show that Johnny Ernst would have possibly won against Jackie Norris, Nathan Sage, Josh Turek, and Zach Walz, or just a generic Democrat as a whole. All these polls, were they all sponsored by Walz? Yeah, all these polls were sponsored by Walz, besides the generic Democrat, which was sponsored by a PAC that supports Democratic candidates. Either way, let's see. Zach Walz could be the favorite, 43 to 42, but was sponsored by him, so could have some numbers leaning towards him. But either way, this state, just going off the predictions and all this, would go towards Iowa. I feel like in a more convincing manner, I'll give it a likely. So now we have Michigan, Ohio, North Carolina, Georgia, and Maine. I'll try to go through these quickly since the video is already getting kind of long. Michigan, let's start with Michigan. Let's see. Michigan, the Democrats have a 3-way primary going on. Oh, I believe this was the one where I thought Bernie Sanders. Yes, okay. I was getting Michigan and Iowa confused or mixed up. But Gary Peters isn't running for re-election. He is retiring. I'm not sure if he has anything else planned. But as of now, he's not running for re-election. Right now, it's between Abdul El Sayed, Malroy McMorrow, and Haley Stevens. Who I think could win this? I mean, just going by who's more probably known, Haley Stevens. I mean, let's see how Abdul Saeed did in 2018. What did he run as? Was he a Democrat or... Okay, he was with the Democrats. Let's see. Yeah, won by over 20%. Still put up a good fight, honestly. I feel like he could potentially win this. But let's see if there's any polls that say who might win this. Overall, Haley Stevens, yeah, okay. And then Republicans will probably be Mike Rogers. I already had the Trump endorsement, has a couple of senators endorsing him. And the prediction market has it all as a toss-up. And let's see here. But obviously there's polls. Let's say it's with Haley Stevens because she's more likely to win the primary. There are more polls in favor of her. Let's see, but are these polls swayed? Not really sure what pack or what direction this pack leans towards, or where all these like people or companies lean toward. But just kind of going off the polls as a whole, Haley Stevens does seem to be coming out on top and more convincingly. I mean, 35-41, then 49-43. So I'll give Michigan I'll give it to the Democrats. I think that's a lean state because it could get close, but in a blue year, I think it'd be more likely if anything. Anywho, moving on to Ohio. Let's see how Ohio is. Ohio in 2014, in a red wave year, Sherrod Brown lost his re-election against, who was it again? Let's see. Lost his re-election against Bernie Moreno. But after some convincing and talking to, he's been convinced to run again 2026 under probably a blue year. I'm assuming probably convinced by the Democrat Party and Chuck Schumer. And he'll be going against Jon Husted, who replaced J.D. Vance as senator since he backed down to become vice president. So, I feel like a pretty close race here. I'm pretty sure Jon Husted is also a bit popular in the Republican or like in the state of Ohio overall. And right here we have a couple predictions and a couple polls. So race to the White House, which I feel like tends to be more updated as a whole, has a toss-up. But inside elections, the Cook Political Report and Sabado's Crystal Ball all has a lean Republican. Aggregate polls have it as Jon Husted winning by roughly 1%, by 1 point. And these polls also usually have Jon Husted winning. And even Emerson College, which I feel like it's an amazing pollster, usually gets everything right, has them winning twice, though Sherrod Brown is closing the gap. I think this could move more towards a toss-up as November comes and campaign and ads ramp up. But as of now, Ohio I feel like would be a likely Republican, which already gives Republicans the lead in the Senate since they have J.D. Vance as a tiebreaker. So even if Democrats sweep these three states, they'll still need to depend on at least one Republican switching over and voting for Democrats to pass anything, which, I mean, it's a lot better than the situation right now, I would say. But it's not ideal considering how unpopular Trump is and how this is a blue wave year. So let's go to Georgia, which I feel like is kind of a slam dunk for Jon Ossoff. There's not really any he's not really facing any competitions, has raised over $50 million. He is a good campaigner, he just knows how to raise money and all that. Republicans have a couple people, have three main options, a football coach, and then Buddy Carter, who is Georgia's first, or representative for Georgia's first congressional district, and Matt Collins, who is Georgia's representative for the 10th congressional district. They probably would have want Brian Kemp, and he's really popular and very strong here, but he chose to not run, endorse Dooley. Let's see if there's any polls so far, which, yeah, shows Mike Collins winning, which I believe he got. Did any of these get the Trump endorsement? Not as of now, but I feel like it could probably go to Mike Collins since he's already winning by roughly 10. Even these polls shows Mike Collins usually coming out on top. So let's just say Mike Collins is the candidate for Republicans. We have 4 predictions. Race to the House shows as lean Democrats, and then the rest shows as toss-up. Against Buddy Carter, Jon Ossoff wins pretty convincingly. Hasn't lost a single poll against him. Same with Mike Collins, where he only tied 1 poll, but it was a poll conducted by a right-leaning pollster. So good for some numbers. Has won against Mike Collins. All the other times, even winning by over 10 or by 10%. And against Derek Dooley, he still wins against them pretty convincingly. I think Republicans really need to put effort into this race to keep Georgia as a more purple state in future elections. I think if they just let this fall to Jon Ossoff, this could lead to Georgia becoming more of a guaranteed state, maybe like a New Mexico kind of state for the Democrats, where like they could technically win. I say more like a Minnesota state where they could technically win, but Democrats always have the edge. So let's move on to North Carolina, which I feel like is probably going to the Democrats. They are running a very popular candidate, Roy Cooper, who's never lost a single like public election in North Carolina, and the Republicans aren't really running anyone that strong. They're running Don Brown, who hasn't been elected into anything, and then they're also running Michael Whatley, who was just the chair of the Republican National Committee. Michael Whatley, who also had the Donald Trump endorsement, which means he'll probably win this. Are there any polls? Oh yeah, Tom Tillis, also incumbent senator, he decided to back down after facing a lot of backlash by the Republican Party for sort of resisting Trump in a couple like votes. I think the main one being the Big Beautiful Bill. So yeah, he was considered a very vulnerable candidate. The polls kind of show that, not against Mark Robinson, but against just someone else as a whole, and Laura Trump, which is that's a crazy poll for an incumbent too. But let's just say Michael Whatley wins it because obviously he had the Trump endorsement. He already has a couple senators, Majority Leader John Thune endorsing him. But Democrats running Roy Cooper. We have Race to the White House saying that Democrats will finally be able to flip this seat. For some context, Democrats have been fighting for this seat since I feel like 2008, 2008 I think was the last time North Carolina voted Democrat in an election, but they have consistently voted Democrat for like more local elections, like the governor race. So let's look right here. Michael Whatley versus Roy Cooper. On average, Roy Cooper wins by 5%. And has only tied 1 poll against Michael Whatley. I think this could be a not slam dunk, maybe slam dunk for like Democrat standards. I give them a lean. I think this could really surprise people how much this might flip to the Democrats. And then let's go over to Maine, which is really interesting. I really want to see how Maine turns out because Susan Collins is the incumbent senator, has been in office since the 1990s, knows Maine, knows how things go, but has been becoming more vulnerable as years go by. In 2020, it was predicted that she was going to lose, but she actually overperformed massively and a blue wave year as well. Let's see, 2020, a lot of these pollsters and pollsters and prediction markets had Sarah Gideon winning. Look at this. Susan Collins losing basically all of these. And then where are the prediction markets? A bunch of prediction markets having Democrats flipping the seat, but they ended up losing by roughly 8 points. But 2026 might be Susan Collins' last election for Senate, I'll say. She is pretty much going to run. Well, I feel like she might not run Donald Trump has been criticizing her a lot, and she could just use this. She might just use that as an excuse to not run, which would definitely doom the Republican Party here. I don't think they have a strong enough candidate on the same level as Susan Collins to win this seat. But she's been endorsed by Joe Manchin, which was a former Democrat, now independent. He's very moderate, and AIPAC, which could backfire on her, seeing how people are like turning against Israel. There are two major candidates here for the Democrat primary. There is Janet Mills, the current governor of Maine, but she is very old. She will be, I'm pretty sure, the oldest freshman elected into Congress if she does win this. I think she'd be like 79. Yeah, she's 78 right now, so I think she would be 79 if she were to win and be inaugurated. And then there is progressive candidate Graham Plattner, who was part of the military and is currently an oyster farmer, if I remember correctly. He kind of came out of nowhere. Or there are also more people running, like Jordan Wood and Dan Cleveland, I remember, were a bit popular, even with the polls. But right here we have Janet Mills, endorsed by more establishment Democrats, I'll say. And then Graham Plattner, endorsed by more progressive people like Bernie Sanders, Ro Khanna, and all that. And he's been doing very good in polls. Right here, he's overall losing to Janet Mills by 0.2%, but has this poll where he's winning by 7.3%, but that's on aggregate. Here are a more like on average polls, which I feel like he wins a lot more convincingly, a lot more often against Janet Mills. Like right here, 46 or 58 to 24, 46 to 25, 58 to 38. Janet Mills wins by smaller amounts, with her biggest amounts just being a 10-point win compared to Graham Plattner. I feel like Graham Plattner is going to win this primary. I just have a strong feeling about it. I think Janet Mills, I think it's really her age. I think if she was maybe 10 years younger, she could win this. But I think people will put some faith into Graham Plattner and give him the opportunity to try to beat Susan Collins. And even in the polls, Graham Plattner is beating Susan Collins on average and by bigger margins, I believe. That might be a lie. But more on average, has tied once, has never lost against her, while Janet Mills has won once, lost once, and tied once. So yeah, really interesting. Really curious on how this could come out, or how this election, the outcome of this election. The prediction market has mostly toss-ups, with Inside Elections not updating their prediction, still has a tilt Republican. But I think I'll be the tiebreaker here, saying it's Graham Plattner versus Susan Collins. I think Graham Plattner can finally flip this seat back to the Democrats after Maine being a pretty convincing, I feel like, Democrat state and on the national level and in multiple local levels besides their second congressional district. So here we have it. We have 50 for Democrats, 50 for Republicans. I can definitely see it being 50 to 49 and then one independent in Nebraska, or 51 to 49 in Texas and all that. But as of right now, 50 to 50 Democrat or Republicans, hold the Senate with J.D. Vance being a tiebreaker. And yeah. Thank you for watching my video. This is my first video. I would appreciate greatly if you guys would subscribe. I'm hoping to make more of these videos in the future and have this be a little hobby of mine. I think next video I'll go more into depth on myself and all that, and why I like making these videos and all that. But thank you for watching. Please subscribe, and I'll see you guys later. Bye bye.